Okay. Just started the recording. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about pursuing STEM in college and really furthering your interest from high school and how you can translate that into college or at university during undergrad. So I'll start off with a brief introduction about myself. My name is Chinmayi Balusu. I'm a rising sophomore undergrad at Columbia University in New York City. I'm technically still undeclared. I have yet to declare my major at the end of sophomore year. But as of now, I'm really interested in pursuing a mix of neuroscience, life sciences, and medical humanities, and I can talk about that later as well. I am the founder of a nonprofit known as Simply Neuroscience, which is based around interdisciplinary neuroscience through a framework of education, outreach, and awareness. Outside of Simply Neuroscience and schoolwork, I'm also heavily involved in scientific research and outreach. I'm currently involved in cognitive neuroscience, neuropathology-related research, including also traumatic brain injury, another avenue. And during high school, I was involved in neurodegenerative diseases research and biomedicine. And science fairs have really been a big part of my journey, and I can talk about that later if anyone has any questions. During high school, I was really passionate about medical history and competed in National History Day California multiple times, and also discovered my interest for neuroscience pretty early on towards the start of high school, and competed in these high school neuroscience competitions called Brain Bee, for which I was able to represent from regional through national levels. So outside of that, I'm also involved in women in STEM advocacy, and I'm passionate about community service and mentoring younger students. In my free time, I enjoy practicing Taekwondo. I write poetry sometimes, and I'm originally from California, and so I do really love the outdoors and exploring trails near my home. That's a bit about me. Also, if you guys have any questions as we go through, feel free to enter them in the chat. I have it pulled up on my screen too, so I can answer them as we go, or feel free to hold your questions till the end. So I just wanted to start off with this statement that I have made before, so indirectly I'm quoting myself, but I truly believe that STEM was something that called to me really early on. I was involved in a biotechnology initiative when I was in middle school, and I was really fascinated with pipettes the first time that I was able to work with them. And I don't think that, my STEM journey may have evolved along the way, but I've never stopped loving the idea of science or scientific inquiry since that point. So I've given you a little bit of background about what I did in high school, and I really would love to discuss more about, what ways I'm still involved in science and related fields in undergrad right now, and ways that other students can get involved in STEM opportunities through college as well. So really overall, before we dive into specific details, is of course, I know most of you guys are probably looking into colleges, probably maybe even going into college this year, or perhaps older students, but definitely do put effort into understanding what STEM looks like at different colleges. Every college has its own framework built in around the sciences. Some are highly interdisciplinary. It's built into their very heart. For instance, I am an undergrad at Columbia where the core curriculum is very strong. And so while I am in a very heavy neuro and science involvement, I'm also kind of getting the best of both worlds in terms of humanities and science through the core curriculum at Columbia. So every college, of course, like I said, is different, and that's really important. It's a really important factor to consider when you are looking into colleges and doing your research, preparing your college list. So I'll start off by talking about coursework in colleges. Now, obviously, for most colleges, you do not actually declare your major officially until your second year of college, or even until the end of sophomore year. So you might come into college as, for instance, a neuroscience major. But of course, you are not, in most cases, it's not necessary to hold fast to that commitment. Most colleges are very, very flexible, with letting you explore different majors. And honestly, you can go from something like neuroscience all the way to economics. So honestly, a lot of exploration does go into the whole deciding what you want to pursue your bachelor's degree in college. So Flexibility is key. As for coursework though, depending on what path you're going in STEM, a lot of it can affect which classes you sign up for. For instance, I know a lot of students in STEM often think of going into medicine, and as a pre-med student, you might be required to take courses such as chemistry, biology, a couple mathematics courses, physics, and the gigantic OChem that we all know very fondly. So that can define your path a little bit. But of course, there's also ways to pursue non-medicine STEM careers. Some people go into academia, pursue a master's or a graduate degree, become a postdoc, a PhD postdoc. Some people go into science communication, where people are actively working to translate research and scientific findings into much more easily understandable ways for different folks. And I know some people have become science illustrators, so art is a great intersection there. But basically tying it back to the idea of coursework, it's really up to you to explore within the limits that your college puts on you. Of course, you can't take, for colleges, for instance, I know Columbia has a limit of 18 credits per term as the max that you can take each semester. So within those course limits and within what core classes or general education classes might be required by your university, I do highly recommend taking both general and niche science interests courses. So for instance, courses like Frontiers in Science or science seminars that are open to first year students is a really great way to get a broad level idea of how each field is, how the involvement in each field is at your university. So, and along with that, you might take more larger lecture courses like in chem or science that I spoke about. A lot of science, very science related majors such as biology, chemistry and such will have a lot of those same basic courses that are applicable to most majors. But of course, as you start getting into tech and engineering and mathematics, it tends to also become more specific, but perhaps straying a little bit from the natural life sciences side. And I can personally speak to the life sciences side of STEM more. So just take my perspective with a grain of salt, as I say. Coursework is definitely, do explore, sign up for very interesting classes, both in terms of large lecture style courses as well as smaller seminar scale ones that can really allow you to interact more closely with your professor and peers. I've attended moderate level courses for lectures, and professors are still very approachable, but there's nothing that can beat having a seminar course where I had, just 8 students in the class and a teaching assistant and a professor. So of course, it depends from person to person and college to college. Now for the advising part, this is common to a number of universities across the States and Canada and other countries as well. There is an advising office, and you are usually assigned an advising dean or an advisor as soon as you enter into the college, basically. And they are a pretty stable part of your 4-year experience or 5-year experience in college. And they're there to support you in all of your academic endeavors, advise you on different classes, and really be a point of contact for any help that you need with opportunities and reaching out and getting help with applying for things. They can help with letters of recommendation, supporting you. Sometimes there's institutional letters required from advisors for more advanced opportunities. So that's something that advising offices and advising deans usually help out with as well. Pre-professional advising is sort of also under the advising umbrella. They are more geared towards pre-med, pre-law, different, basically you can think of all the attachments on there, but basically helping you prepare for the next step of your career in terms of graduate school, advanced education, things like that. So they are there to support you through making sure that you have all the courses required for the next applications for med, grad school, and such. And they're really honestly a very great resource to consult with a lot of the times. Now, community engagement and global engagement is shifting a little bit away from advising and coursework. I'm referring to engagement in the sense of you do not need to simply go to take a science course to become involved in STEM in college, but rather there's ways to help out in your community. I know Columbia's Zuckerman Institute has a Saturdays for Science program where students are introduced to neuroscience and basic sciences at a very young age, elementary through high school, I believe. And undergrad students can get involved in initiatives such as those. So even if, let's say, you are maybe a finances, economics, or art major, history major, there's still ways that you can get involved in STEM, even though you're not pursuing that straight STEM bachelor's degree. Through community engagement, you can volunteer to mentor students who are interested in STEM. And even if you come from outside STEM backgrounds, you still do have an interesting perspective on science, I strongly believe, which is very valuable in team settings like those. And it's also great to know that you can make an impact on younger students in your community. As for the global engagement part, this may be more related to study abroad programs. I know a lot of my peers have pursued degrees through dual BA programs abroad. I can think of Sciences Po Paris at the top of my head. This also depends from college to college. Most of these do depend from college to college, as always. But studying abroad is a really neat way to gain global experience living in a country, living abroad while you're still a student, and having more time to explore science in a different setting too, I would say. I mean, even if in that semester that you are studying abroad, let's say you're not taking a STEM course, you can still get involved in local scientific outreach efforts and such in wherever location you are. And it's a really interesting experience. I personally have not pursued study abroad as of now, but I do know I have friends who have done study abroad experiences and global engagement programs over the summer, for instance, and they have shared that it is truly a very valuable experience to pursue, both for STEM and non-STEM majors. Coming back to campus, on-campus student organizations are an absolutely essential way to really round out your college STEM experience. They honestly can really promote what you have learned outside of the classroom and allow you to apply a STEM background in a more meaningful way. Also really provides a way of meeting other science enthusiasts from around campus. I'm involved in a club called Columbia Synapse, or more so an organization called Columbia Synapse that is based around traumatic brain injury, advocacy, and awareness. And I've met many STEM friends through that, but also people who are outside STEM as well. And that it's a very interesting club because, of course, it's not necessarily fully tied into STEM. It is still based on awareness and advocacy, though in neuroscience principles. But it has honestly been a tremendous experience, and it's one that I would love to continue all throughout my rest of my college career. So getting involved in on-campus student organizations like that is a great way to go beyond, I'm just going to take a biology course and learn about biology, but rather taking that a step further and making a direct impact on your campus community. I know science trivia nights are really big at my university. We have science screenings of films. I believe we had a filming of Interstellar even through a club. So a great way to get involved in science efforts on campus as well. Now, nonprofit organizations and startup culture is really big at certain universities, depends on which college again, of course, but entrepreneurship side, there are some really interesting pharmaceutical startups. Also, location is a big part. If your college is located in a big city, metropolitan hub, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved with local businesses and larger scale ones. But I strongly believe nonprofit organizations and startups, though they may be based in STEM concepts and ideas in that framework too, but they also really give you valuable real life experience that you can use to develop your career further. I would strongly say that my experiences with leading Simply Neuroscience in the past year and a month or so has presented me with perspective and skills that I don't think I would have been able to gain in the same way throughout college without putting in a lot of different efforts and spreading myself too thin. So it's really important to get involved in those organizations, startups, businesses, whichever avenue you want to pursue, only if you are interested and only if that really fits into your journey and not just necessarily doing something because you want to get involved in a startup or found a startup, but rather because you want to make a meaningful impact with the science field that you are pursuing, I would say. a big part, perhaps one of the biggest points that people think of when they think of STEM is research and different jobs and internships. Definitely, there are career centers at most universities that can connect you with jobs and internships that can give you more hands-on experience in sciences. Research is very big at a lot of private research institutions, for instance. Many of the T20 colleges have really large emphasis on research, but regardless, every college has a way for you to go above and beyond coursework in STEM and really be able to conduct an investigation more hands-on way into a topic that you're interested in. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the form of internship or job where you are in a lab, for example. There's really valuable ways to get involved through simply reading scientific literature and investigating a concept or furthering concepts, assisting professors in their research work, or perhaps even just shadowing professors or professionals as they are working. It's also very common for college students to reach out to older, more established experts and ask to shadow them for a day and just simply maybe even just chat for a little bit and learn about what their journey to pursuing a STEM. Perhaps it doesn't have to be directly clinical or academia, but rather in larger companies or businesses. Some people, may get a degree in biology, but then go off to do something completely different. So it's also interesting to see how their STEM journeys evolved. Of course, tying that into, skipping over one point for now, but cold contacting and networking are very useful to get involved in super early. I won't go too much into depth about those because there have been a multitude of very valuable workshops over this summer from both Achieve Club and other organizations as well that you can find online, especially Girls in STEM organizations that are guiding students through these processes. But in general, I will say that cold contacting, so basically that means reaching out to individuals who you have not necessarily met before or spoken with before, usually happens over emailing, social media, maybe perhaps not social media itself, but LinkedIn is common, LinkedIn and email. Phone calls are pretty rare as well. But cold contacting and really knowing how to reach out to someone and ask to learn more about their career or learn how to reach out about opportunities or just ideas and such is really valuable. I know in neuroscience, which is more my niche, but a number of students find cold contacting skills very valuable because it's much easier to be able to reach out to professors and request to get involved in their lab, for instance, or simply to learn more about the classes they're teaching, the work that they're doing and such. Networking sort of parallels that as well. LinkedIn is a very huge networking platform, and I highly recommend high school students and college students get involved with LinkedIn. You don't necessarily have to be fully fledged, put a lot of time into LinkedIn, but rather keeping in touch with people you have met along the way is a very big chunk of what goes into LinkedIn at its very core. Really do maintain those relationships that you come across in life because you never know how you can help support others and others can support your journey as well, especially in science. I would say that entrepreneurship is sort of the large perception that people have when they think of networking, but I strongly do believe science is also moving into a way of reaching out to other folks and keeping in touch through networking. So science is definitely, and STEM at Broad too, is definitely moving into putting more emphasis on networking as well. So I believe that it's a very valuable skill set to have developing even now in college early on in your career so you can put those skills to great use later on. Now, I know I wrote about Handshake and WayUp, and those are platforms that work really similarly to LinkedIn. You can find opportunities through them. You can get in touch with other folks through them. Sometimes schools have tie-ups with Handshake and WayUp to provide better opportunities for students. And it may not be very applicable to younger students. I'm thinking of high school students, but for college students, they might find it useful for hearing about different opportunities in tech, research, biotechnology, for instance, engineering, data sciences, and such. So it's useful to keep an eye out on those platforms to look out for opportunities that may not necessarily be cold contacting per se, but you can apply to those opportunities. And of course, These are all suggestions, and in no way does everything related to your science or STEM journey in college need to fit into one of these categories. There are ways to always create your own path and a myriad of ways to honestly think about pursuing STEM. Like this is definitely a base point, but in no way uh, a comprehensive framework of everything that you could do. So every person's journey is different. I will emphasize that. And, I'm heavily involved in neuroscience at Columbia, but my neuroscience journey is very different from other friends who I have who are pursuing neuroscience at the same university. So every person is different, and part of that because everyone comes from a different background in high school, and it's you honestly can't expect that when translating those experiences from high school into college that it will be absolutely the same. I think this kind of brings me into my next point pretty well. A smooth transition. But advice is that absolutely do explore opportunities that you are not so sure about, that you're a little bit afraid about, because you never know if something will click and if it will fit your interests very well. You honestly do not know. I do not imagine that learning about traumatic brain injury more through Columbia Synapse, for instance, and working to raise awareness about concussion and TBI and supporting individuals who are struggling with that would be very meaningful to me. But I've been able to go from joining this organization to becoming involved with leadership to planning a very large-scale conference, actually the first brain injury conference hosted by a student organization in the Northeast. And we actually were able to invite the chief scientific officer of Regeneron as our keynote speaker. So Regeneron, who hosts ISF, I just realized putting that in context, but it went it went a long way. And now even I decided to get involved in TBI research after getting involved with Synapse and things like that. So I never expected to do that, but I'm very glad I did that. So definitely do take those shots and try those initial opportunities, because you never know. You never know what's hiding behind that closed door. And reach out for guidance at your university whenever you need it. This could be through professional guidance, perhaps reaching out to advisors, older alumni, especially. Alumni networks are very useful at colleges. It's great they're usually very helpful. Alumni are excited to get in touch with younger students because the alma mater support is very evident, but they can provide insight into what their careers look like. And of course, you never need to go into college with the perspective that, oh, I want to be a physician one day and I'm going to stick to that physician shell. There's a multitude of things that you can do along the way to becoming a physician that doesn't necessarily revolve exactly around that future goal. It's important to also live in the present, And the last point I want to leave you all with is that I strongly believe that when you begin college, it's important not to completely wipe everything off your interest and start with a complete clean slate. It's an interesting idea to do so, but I do think that it's still really nice to be able to get involved with activities that you pursued in high school, because it helps you transition to college a little bit better. If you are perhaps really involved in girls in STEM advocacy, for instance, you go to college is really intimidating at the start, not going to lie. It takes a lot of preparation and settling into it. Honestly, for most people, first semester, it takes all of that, all those few months to get settled into the college experience. But perhaps if you wanted to go and join a girls in STEM advocacy club at schools, because many of them have that centered around issues of women empowerment and gender equality. If you joined those clubs based on that mutual interest that you previously carried, it might just be an easier transition because you are surrounded by people who also share that mutual interest, and you might not feel very lost. So, of course, I found that was helpful for me, but again, every person is different, and I think you should definitely spend some time thinking about which interests are very dear to your heart and which you want to keep involved in, and which maybe some that you're not so encouraged or very excited about. Perhaps you tried it out, it was okay, but you want to move on to other things in college. So do definitely spend some time reflecting and think about where you want to go with those interests in college. STEM is so broad, and honestly, a myriad of ways to explore. I found that I sometimes tend to go down a wormhole in science, and there's so much still in tech, engineering, math, so much that I haven't explored yet, but it's science is ever evolving, STEM is ever evolving and growing. And I think the most important thing is to keep in mind, keep in perspective the present and the future. I mean, it is very exciting to work towards a STEM career, but also definitely do take time to admire small things that are happening in everyday life. I mean, it could be as simple as you turned in an assignment for biology class that was a very small scale in consideration with everything, but perhaps you spent a lot of time on that. You learned a new skill. Those little skills are very valuable and they can make a big impact in the future. So do take time to enjoy life as it comes and to not fret to get into college very soon or rush. Do enjoy your high school and early college and honestly every moment as it comes. So yeah, that is all I have for you for the presentation side. And I would be happy to answer any questions. Audrey, how do we want to do this? Do we want to use the chat feature or if anyone wants to unmute themselves perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Either way honestly works. If you're not comfortable with unmuting yourselves, just put it in the chat. I'm sure that we can all see it. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just put it in the chat right now. And we have around 10 more minutes for questions if we want to go to the 40-minute mark.
Should we send a message to everyone or to one of the hosts?
Can you just send it to everyone so that we can see what your question is? It makes it a little bit more clear.
Okay, thank you.
If it's a more private question, just feel free to individually message me as well and I can see it pop up on my screen. So it looks like we have a question from Claire. There's often an assumption that STEM classes are harder in college than humanities. Do you think that's true? Honestly, I don't believe that. I have taken a mix of both STEM and humanities courses and they are distinct in their own way. It depends on individual interests as well and individual kind of just your personality in terms of how you approach studying and education. I believe part of that misconception stems from the idea that STEM courses only have exams and maybe perhaps one large group project at the end, but that's it. On the other hand, humanities might not exactly have exams, but rather more essays, essay-based assignments, and perhaps not a final even, maybe a final essay. So some people in STEM find essay writing very hard and therefore think that humanities are actually much harder than STEM classes. Humanities majors may think that STEM classes are much more harder. It depends from person to person. I've personally found that I like having a blend of both STEM and humanities courses balancing out each other in every semester, just because it's nice not to have 10 exams at the same time and have more thoughtful, reflective essays on the more literature humanities or art humanities side as well. So let's see. Angelica has a question. Can you recommend any ways to get a head start of getting involved in STEM in high school? I would definitely encourage looking out for nonprofit organizations to get involved with. Many organizations have social media pages on Instagram. LinkedIn is a big one too. And these opportunities, I think, truly give you a way to make a meaningful impact in science and apply your science knowledge, whether it be through content creation, writing for a blog, or getting involved with a podcast and such. So I do definitely recommend looking into nonprofit work. It's very dear to my heart. So maybe I'm a little bit biased, but also it may be through hands-on opportunities. I think science fairs are a great way to pursue independent interests and be able to present that to a larger audience as well. So things like science fairs, take interesting classes. Some people discount classes like AP Environmental Science or AP Biology, AP Chem, even AP Psych. I loved AP Psych. So definitely do take advanced courses in sciences if they are available at your school. And really keep an eye out for any interesting opportunities with nonprofits and such. We'll move a little bit faster just so we don't run out of time. Question says, you mentioned cold emailing professors once you're in college, but do you think there's value in doing that as a rising senior? Absolutely. I will say though that some professors are more likely to accept undergraduate students in assisting with their work simply because when you are an undergrad, you have more of a solid base. You have taken more coursework that may be advanced and relevant to a professor's work. But I think shoot your shot, honestly. Reach out to a professor if you're interested. And perhaps they may not offer for you to directly help out with their work, but you can still perhaps schedule a call with them for a few minutes and chat about what they're doing. It's still really interesting to be able to do so. Or some people, maybe not in the time of the pandemic, but some people may offer that you can come and visit their lab and just learn more. Question says, is it still possible to get into a good pre-med program with relatively lower grades in your science courses? I'm not sure if you're speaking about high school or college level science courses, but honestly, either way, there are ways to improve high school. Got you. Honestly, med schools, usually the perception has been that they only care about college grades. And I think it's just a matter of, it's okay to, struggling with courses that's perfectly fine. It's not the end of the world, right? Like some courses are tough. Science may be tough for, individuals. Science was tough for me at the start too. It's tough for anyone. So the biggest part is growth. And I think med schools, grad schools, and anyone in general would really want to see that you are trying hard, you are taking courses that challenge yourself, and that you are, even if it's gradually, you are improving along the way. So it's not the end of the world. And as some programs are starting up, they're called post-baccalaureate programs for individuals who perhaps even struggled with GPAs or grades during college. And post-bac programs are a great way to boost your profile before applying to med school or so. But that may be a very long time in the future since you're in high school. Another question, is there any way you can start your own passion project with STEM other than nonprofits? Like I mentioned, science fairs are very near and dear to me. They're a great way to get involved independently or perhaps even with a group. You can even do a group project with friends to explore a science topic of your interest. Other ways you can get involved are some middle and high schools have after-school science clubs. Science fairs is a big thing. Neuroscience has the brain bee competitions that people will go to, and some people self-study STEM on their own through that. Also, definitely reach out to your teachers, because teachers, we don't really tend to reach out to teachers enough, I believe. They do have a lot of suggestions on ways you can get involved. And since they, are directly involved with you on a daily, weekly basis, and they know your interests, and they know your local community, they can give you more personalized recommendations on ways you can reach out to local opportunities and such. And I would definitely look into if there's any science outreach programs at universities or perhaps even companies located near you in your geographic region that can mentor high school students in STEM early on. And they may be able to provide you resources with starting your passion project too. Another question is, are there any free available resources you found useful for neuroscience or any STEM courses in general? Yeah, so I'm gonna shout out Simply Neuroscience real quick, not as a conflict of interest, but because Simply Neuroscience is actually actively working to release neuroscience guides and mental health awareness guides on our website coming soon that are a great starting point to self-study neuroscience. Delving into neuroscience is a little bit difficult early on because, I will be completely honest, there's not too many resources geared towards high schoolers. So one of my biggest resources, I would say, for neuroscience specifically is...
Not only is it a
it's locked. Yes, go ahead.
6-year, not only is it...
Oh, okay. There's a book called Brain Facts, and I can perhaps type it into the chat, but this is through the Society for Neuroscience, I believe. Society for Neuroscience is a neuroscience organization that also has a multitude of resources available online, along with this book called Brain Facts that is free. STEM courses in general online, honestly, a simple search into LinkedIn, Google, or Instagram can get you a lot of results. So I can't think of, you might be able to tell, I'm very into niche neuroscience. That's most of what my expertise is around. But in general, STEM courses as well. Oh, actually, there is an organization called Beyond the Five, which offers free online courses for students during the academic school year. They have quite a few courses, taught by students who have taken those courses before, and college students, including myself. So that is one organization that I found has really put effort into creating STEM courses that are accessible for younger students, like yourself, perhaps. And do definitely reach out to teachers as well. Teachers usually have free resources that they get as educators that they can also support you with. So do take advantage of, online resources as well as resources that are close to you. So even through your school. Seems like that's all the questions in the chat. If there are any questions?
Yeah, so if there aren't any more questions, we'll probably end it here. If you do have more questions, Chinmayi, if you're okay with them reaching out to you, or
Absolutely.
they could email Achieve Club at achieveclubinitiative@gmail.com, and then we'll try to redirect the questions to. Okay, so Zane said that he wants to recommend Beyond the Fives Intro to COVID Research course. So if any of you guys are interested in that, definitely go check that out. And this was a really awesome seminar. Thank you so much for presenting.
Thanks for having me, everyone, and thank you for your questions. Great questions. Happy to be here.
All right, great. So that's the end of the seminar. Thank you to everyone who attended. Once again, thank you for presenting, and I'll end the meeting here.
All right, bye-bye.